Hi there, it's Rick Samans with the World Economic Forum and Climate Disclosure Standards Board, calling in a few comments related to the excellent papers that have been prepared by IIRC for the upcoming council meeting. Let me just start off by with maybe a bit of a reminder for all of us that the IIRC, its remit is broader and deeper, I'd say, than the the issue of the day, which is how do we get a better, more joined-up sustainability reporting system going. And what I mean by that is that the IRC's scope is certainly broader than sustainability, right? It is non-financial and various kinds of non or pre-financial considerations, and encouraging a better, more integrated, interconnected process of thinking, and by extension, communication about that thinking and the results of it. And so therefore it is, in that sense, broader than the current debate. Secondly, it's deeper too, because the framework, the IR framework, is a conceptual framework. It's not a standard per se. It doesn't prescribe how you implement where and what in what part of the corporate reporting landscape. It really is an intellectual anchor that will guide reporters and others in their thinking about how they approach, the reporting generally and specific problems therein. So, with that as just some contextual comments, let me move into the heart of the comments about the papers and the IRC's future as an institution. In doing so, I'd like to start with a couple of principles here. Certainly guide me in my thinking in this space. And I commend them to the attention of colleagues in the council. First, really what we should be after here is a global, coherent standard or system of standards for this sustainability reporting world. And that it is done in a way where you can see the pathways for how it does connect to the financial side of reporting. This is in contrast, of course, to a country-specific or regionally specific or issue-specific approach to the issue. So that principle of it being globally coherent, I think, is a fundamental one, should guide our thinking. Secondly, I would suggest that a key principle here, a foundational principle, is that this whole enterprise be market-based and market-led, as opposed to being something where we, through some legislative or other governmental action, kind of create a whole new process from scratch, which doesn't take into account, doesn't build upon the very considerable work that's been done over the years and in specific standards that exist and are being applied in the market today. Maybe those are blindingly obvious, but I think these are pretty good anchor principles for us as we consider lots of issues in this debate, but including the IRC's own future. Now, having said that, it's not to diminish the significance of the renewed official community's interest in this issue. The intergovernmental and even the kind of quasi-official world of the accounting authorities, their interests and increased activity in this space is to be welcomed. It's important, it's desirable, it's potentially game-changing, but I just don't think we should overly focus on that generally, but also specifically with respect to the IRC options on the table. Indeed, it could be counterproductive to get so focused on that, because I think those processes are going to take a while to play out, not least because of the politics of them. Moreover, though, I think that there's a danger that if this community puts its eggs in the basket of kind of an intergovernmental process, there is a risk that that process could start from scratch, and without building on what the market has been creating over recent years. And whereas if the market actors, and by that I define it to mean not only the corporates, but the investment community, the accounting community, various parts of the NGO community and technical communities, we have an opportunity here to get ahead of that and indeed to lead in a constructive way where the regulators ultimately land. So for both substantive reasons, but also I think just for just the calendar and the political considerations, we not only have an opportunity in the market, but I would argue a responsibility to lead here and to move forward, in engaging the official community and indeed including it in some fashion. I'll get to that a little bit later, but not sort of viewing it as the holy grail in any immediate sense of the word. Now, moving on, what does that mean in practical terms, and where does the IIRC fit into that potentially going forward? I do think that the catalyzation and creation of that more joined up, globally coherent sustainability standard or system of standards can be driven now. And the good news is that a number of the key and relevant standards organizations in this regard are working much more intensively together and having much better communication and sort of seeing the big picture together in a way that arguably they haven't over many, many years, if I can say so constructively. Indeed, there are some quite specific discussions underway right now between and among these NGO standards as to how they could more concretely align and even potentially ally with each other, and in so doing give some joint guidance to the market of how their standards fit together and how their institutions fit together to provide the practical basis for the type of globally coherent system that we need. Let me open a parenthesis here in this respect. I know there's a lot of interest in the World Economic Forum's International Business Council's project on common metrics and consistent reporting. We see that, I certainly see that as a stimulus, an accelerator toward this global market-based, more coherent standard or system of standards, not as that system or standard in and of itself. This is a collective action undertaking by our firms, a number of our firms, to try to push the process forward a bit by agreeing among themselves to report in a consistent fashion on a nucleus of metrics and recommended disclosures, not to the exclusion of their wider and deeper reporting under these existing frameworks, but as a way to add some additional oomph, additional momentum to getting the ecosystem to kind of get its act together, to get better aligned and integrated and moving forward. Now, back to the IIRC options institutionally, its future. I do think that they're between this medium-term role that I hope that the official community, the intergovernmental community will play, and the immediate opportunity that I just described for the market-based actors to really come together and provide a clear joint vision of how their standards fit together and how they can form the basis of that global system. There is a missing middle piece, and I think the IIRC has a few assets that would contribute to that, filling in that middle piece, that middleware, if you will, of the software we need for this whole process to work out optimally. And I think there are three elements here, three strategic assets that the IIRC has, and that should influence how we think what its institutional profile and composition or makeup should be going forward. The first of the three is the framework itself. As I said previously, the framework is a very useful intellectual anchor. It's a conceptual framework or basis. It is not a standard in and of itself, but I think it will be very useful as a foundation for this system generally as it evolves. Secondly is the council. I think maybe not the council itself as it's currently composed, but I think the notion of a multi-stakeholder, high-level stewardship body composed of principals, PALs, leaders of the the financial and non-financial worlds, the different standard setters, different parts of the private sector, indeed including some representatives from the governmental community or the intergovernmental community that have competence or real interest in this area. This kind of a body could serve the role of a very useful oversight mechanism for what I described a moment ago of this process of the market-based actors getting themselves together. Particularly in the absence of a direct, explicit mandate democratically from a group of governments for this global system, I think having this type of a multi-stakeholder high-level council, at least in some sort of interim role over the next 3 years or so, add that legitimacy, invest additional momentum and political and other private sector interest and capital into the whole exercise would be very, very useful and even essential. And the third asset, I think, is the corporate reporting dialogue, the CRD. I believe this is actually quite a useful forum. It's a sub-community of the IIRC, a very useful one, I would say, of dialogue among the financial and non-financial standard setters themselves. I think these three pieces could usefully be embedded in some sort of an institution. Maybe I'd rather call it an arrangement, not necessarily a kind of a formal institution that could be very complementary to the work that is being done and will be further built out, I hope and expect, among the sustainability standard setters themselves on the one hand, and the political authorities who in various ways, different geometries, are getting more interested in the subject. To the extent that this is what we have in mind in the document when we're talking about option 2 and 3, I would support those options, one or the other. The Corporate Reporting Foundation nomenclature, I believe, probably comes from the Cogito paper, which I thought was a great paper. But what I'm describing here could either be called that or it could be called something a little bit different. The main point here is that as far as the IIRC's future institutional makeup is concerned, I think those three elements could be rolled into this type of an arrangement. And in so doing, the IIRC could really make a very strong contribution to the progress of the field, and part of the IIRC's staff and otherwise potentially could play a role in that. But I would emphasize that what I'm talking about is not the IIRC itself as currently configured. So last thing, maybe I'll end up where I started, which is that such an arrangement, while very focused on sustainability reporting now, could usefully have the broader remit that I talked about that the IIRC has currently, which is even beyond sustainability. There are other issues, relevant to the integration of reporting across financial and non-financial worlds, which are not very well addressed currently, and that go beyond sustainability, notably dealing with different aspects of intangibles, which are, by many measures, make up the majority of the market value, market cap of companies these days, and certainly have huge implications for living standards and for people, and how they're treated and how they're valued, and how companies report on that aspect of their value creation. So what I've just described here would also fit in that respect, the sort of the heritage of the IIRC's broad thinking and deep thinking about that kind of a world, the kind of world we need for reporting, could be reflected very, very well in what I just described, some sort of an arrangement under whose aegis this ecosystem would be defined and built out and aligned much more specifically over the next few years in a way that many governmental jurisdictions could then sweep into regulation in a few years' time, because it's been largely sorted out and tested in the market itself by the most competent actors. So those are thoughts about the IIRC's future and related issues. I look forward to the discussion virtually we're going to have in a bit of time, and wish everybody well in this very, very unusual period.